Coming up on We Talk News this week, Delaware is now on the verge of becoming the 22nd state to legalize adult use of cannabis. But will that governor use their veto power again? New York State is starting to move on the illegal pop-up shops in that city and state. Plus, Hudson Valley is given the green light for dispensaries. A heinous murder in North Carolina at a hemp store will deliver the death penalty to the perpetrator. Ben Cohen of Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream wants to help the black entrepreneur in the cannabis business. And Washington State is poised to become the third state to ban cannabis testing for all employees. Plus, it's Hash Bash weekend in Michigan. All that and more on We Talk News with Alaina Pinto. Next.
So for years, we've been doing manufacturing, financial services, medical, and so forth on businesses that stand alone, from doctors' offices to day traders to even small banks. And so when cannabis came along, all of the tools, skills, and miscellaneous that we learned in there, we were able to apply it for them. And for us, it wasn't that big of a problem or a challenge. It worked great. And so they just needed a reporting feature in one software, and luckily that the software company came through for us, came it back, and now it's become the backbone for our offerings, and it's worked out incredibly well.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi everyone, I'm Alaina Pinto, and this is Weed Talk News. The race to become the 22nd adult use of cannabis legal state might belong to Delaware soon. Both the House and the Delaware Senate have passed bills that would legalize possession of up to an ounce of cannabis and establish a market for the industry. There is a catch here when you consider that their Democratic Governor John Carney already vetoed a similar bill last year. Carney was non-committal when directly asked if he was going to veto the already approved legislation. The legislature can overturn the governor's veto with another positive vote by both houses. So, is Delaware going to be number 22? Stay tuned. Michigan, though, will be celebrating their cannabis industry this weekend with the 52nd Hash Bash, and Rick Thompson will be right in the middle of the celebration.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Well, Hash Bash is this weekend, hence my awesome t-shirt. The incredible event starts at noon on Saturday and runs until you decide to walk away. The combination protest and celebration will feature speakers like U.S. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, the Washtenaw County Prosecutor Ellie Savitt, County Commissioner and former House Rep Yusuf Rabi, plus legends of the cannabis revolution like John Sinclair, Adam Brooke, Melody Carr, and myself. Another legend in cannabis law reform, Jamie Lowell, will be hosting the event, and I am the co-host. Now, if you're attending, wear weather-appropriate clothing and plan your parking out ahead of time. The Bash is a cultural event unlike any other in America. This is our 52nd anniversary of the celebration. But wait, there's more. The first Saturday in April has grown to be far more than just a single event weekend. You can join our parallel event, the Monroe Street Fair, from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m., and the fair is just 2 blocks south of the Hash Bash itself. Then there's the Hash Bash Treasure Hunt, a game where you purchase a treasure map and let it lead you to a dozen fun places in Ann Arbor where map holders are given free gifts of cannabis and merchandise. Not to be outdone, the Hash Bash Cup offers 3 days of partying starting on Friday, running through Sunday. It's a whole hotel takeover where cannabis consumption goes down in every corner of the space. A few days later, join the Michael Thompson Clemency Project for a frank discussion about freeing incarcerated people from Michigan prisons, featuring actor and Senate candidate Hill Harper. moderating a panel of experts. Now, that's on the 17th. And on the 20th, there's the 6-pound cannabis giveaway at Lighten Up Provisioning Center in Flint. So come on out on April 1st and join us as we protest injustice and celebrate our culture. Now, the other huge story this week involves the continuing federal investigation of corruption and influence peddling among Michigan's lawmakers and lobbyists during the formative years of the state's cannabis industry. This investigation has implicated former speakers of the House and former Senate majority leaders in cover-ups and payments made to associates in exchange for favored treatment in the awarding of cannabis business licenses. Now, the latest bombshell was dropped just this week. We've learned that former head of the now defunct Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association lobbying firm named Steve Linder is the center of an investigation into arranging jobs for lawmakers' family members, payments made to family or associates by those seeking adult use cannabis licenses, and more. The probe seems to focus on Linder's access to Republican lawmakers and how his shady contributions bought him the right to tinker with the language of bills being debated in Michigan's legislature. During a terribly ill-advised speech Linder gave to the Kansas legislature last year, he claimed that he dictated policy, shaped legislation with his Republican cronies, and was, quote, the last person to have his fingerprints on the medical marijuana business program, which was created in 2016. Now, that bill was passed over the objections of myself and others. Linder's lackadaisical methodology of influence peddling was honed over more than a decade of prior lobbying experience, specifically while under the Republican administration of Governor Rick Snyder. Oversight of the lobbying industry was lax during Snyder's 8 years, and the horrible, dysfunctional Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act was the result. The lessons here are twofold. First, if you're working with a weasel, expect that you'll be asked to account for all that immoral, weaselly action. And second, if you think nobody's watching what you do, you're wrong. These probes are far from over, and the hits just keep coming. Michigan has seen several bad actors being forced to pay the price of hating on sick people or cheating the system. New York State, this is your future in 3 years. Fly right, keep that money in your pocket. You're going to need it. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News.
Lots going on in the state of New York and the Big Apple itself. One item in particular is certainly head-scratching. There's an illegal dispensary in the state that's being sued by Toys R Us. The store in question is calling itself Zaza R Us, and you can see why the toy store would be upset. Pam Schmiel has that story and more from the always changing cannabis scene in New York State.
It's Pam Schmiel, host of the Mary Jane Society podcast with the New York City Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Big news coming out of New York this week. The legal injunction stopping dispensaries from opening in Western New York has been lifted, except for a small area in the Finger Lakes region. This means that the Office of Cannabis Management can now move forward to approve social equity licenses in that area. And in Brooklyn, Toys R Us is suing an illegal dispensary for a lookalike logo. Are they trying to lure children into their storefront? Do they think that Toys R Us would be amused with trade infringement? And local community boards are looking to their residents to fight the illegal pot shops disrupting their neighborhoods. They are asking the residents to submit the name and location of these storefronts in their neighborhood and plan to make a formal complaint to the city on behalf of these communities. And can New Yorkers get New Yorkers get Medicare or public health providers to pay for their medical marijuana? Well, the bill to make this a reality is now making its way through various committees and assemblies in the New York State Legislature. And in Queens, another dispensary is about to open, but only temporarily. because New York lawmakers are publicly embarrassed by how they have fumbled New York's cannabis rollout, that they are opening pop-up dispensaries to make the public think they are making progress. And the Office of Cannabis Management claims they are doing it to infuse money into the business and then will close for construction for a number of months before they reopen. Business 101 tells me this is not the way to launch a business. That's this week's news, New York City Cannabis Report. I'm Pam Schmiel with the Mary Jane Society podcast, reporting for Weed Talk News.
Thomas Howard from Cannabis Legalization News takes a look at cannabis reform by the Illinois legislature this year with the Illinois Report.
Hey, everybody. My name's Tom. You can find me at CannabisIndustryLawyer.com, by the way, and I'm here to give you an update on what bills have a shot in 2023 out of the state of Illinois. Cannabis amendments happen all the time when a state legalizes it, and we have 2 pages of amendments to go through. I'm going to start with HB 3939. It ain't going nowhere, but it was the Bring Your Own Cannabis bill, and this would allow municipalities to license certain activities. The reason why it didn't make it out may have something to do with an HB we'll talk about later. Then there's HB 3921. That one is still alive. This one allows 540 days, up from the original 180 days, for a dispensary to find a certain location, because we do a conditional process here in Illinois. You don't need a location for your dispensary. In fact, you don't need a location for your dispensary for a year and a half. Wow. And also creates some changes to HVAC requirements for cultivators. And then there's HB 3917, a compassionate use bill that would have gotten rid of certain disqualification for non-violent offenders, but that's going nowhere. And then there's HB 3915, also going nowhere. This would have stopped the department from issuing any more transporter licenses until 2029. Then there's HB 3846, and this provides for expungement for certain minor cannabis offenses, and that is, if you graduate from a community college in Illinois, you can get your minor cannabis offenses automatically expunged. That one moved on to committee. It's got a shot. So does HB 3741, the Cannabis Radiation Labeling Act. So if your cannabis was radiated or irradiated, treated with radiation to kill bugs and pathogens before it was sold to you for smoking, you have to label it. Then there is HB 3499, the rent-seeking quota bill, which is not what it's actually called, but it does amend the act to provide that all dispensaries, cultivation centers, it doesn't say craft growers though, must have at least 40% of their ancillary service contracts, including janitorial, accounting, printing, and other services, to be with a business with at least a 1 certification for being either a minority, female-owned business, or persons with disabilities business. That one made it, even though it probably does violate equal protection, as it is a quota-based system. And there's an affirmative action case from the Supreme Court coming this year. Moving on, HB 3387 redefines what a batch means for testing, not going anywhere. Then there's HB 2632, the Juvenile Expungement Act. So if a person was convicted for cannabis offenses before their 21st birthday, when they become an adult, they would have those automatically expunged. That one has made it, and so has HB 2522, and that contains a provision regarding cannabis delivery operator licenses, requires the department to create a scoring system to issue delivery operator licenses similar to what they have in Massachusetts. This skips right over the dispensary. These delivery licenses can deliver directly to the end consumer and buy their cannabis from any licensed cannabis operator. So they could buy it from the grower and take it directly to the consumer. They could buy it from the retailer location and take it directly to consumer. Then there is HB 2383, and that amends the Cannabis Act to provide that they will issue more dispensing organizations after January 1st of 2022 to people that are or organizations that are 51% owned and controlled by at least one qualified entity with a disability. So they're taking social equity into strange new places. Of disabled means social equity now. HB 2281, that removes language prohibiting dispensing organizations from operating drive-throughs. That one also made it. So also that would include a delivery. So that's kind of mooting the delivery operator. If the dispensary also has the right to go ahead and deliver to the end consumer and have a drive-through, maybe that will combat it. Then there's HB 1989, outdoor grow. We do not have outdoor grow in Illinois. That would change it. It would redefine enclosed lock facility to mean a greenhouse, building, outdoor canopy space, or other enclosed area. That one made it out, and it was reassigned to a different committee on March 10th. All these ones that made it out got reassigned on March 10th. I did a brief thing about it on the last Weed Talk News I was on. Now we go to HB 1436, and that will amend the Cannabis Act to create the Cannabis Equity and Oversight Commission and also create a centralized regulator. So similar to most other states, there's one regulator. In New Jersey, one, New York, Massachusetts, California. In Illinois, they're split between two. The Department of Agriculture for the growers and the processors, and the Department of Professional Regulation for the dispensaries. This would unify that. Made it out. Now, HB 1499 might explain why that other HB 3909, the Bring Your Own Cannabis bill, that would allow municipalities to create events and other types of licensing, didn't make it out, because 1499 does essentially the same thing. It creates local cannabising licensing. It provides that a county or municipality can issue licenses for temporary events, cannabis clubs, cannabis tours that may allow for the sale and consumption of cannabis. That's made it out of committee. Maybe Illinois will become a tourist destination for cannabis. Unlike Vegas, which, why would you go to Illinois when you go to Vegas? And then there's HB 31, and that amends the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act to remove language that says any person or entity awarded a craft grower license can only hold one craft grower license. The current, with where the years are, the current limit is 3. This would raise it to 10. And it does not raise the license limit, but it does say that there would be another round of 30 this year and another round of 30 in 2024. Maybe then they'll raise the license limit, because that would put us over the 150 if they issued 30 this year and 30 next year. And it also requires for THC oil to be made available to our infusers. That's right, they created a whole license type that does not enable the person who has it to actually create their own raw material. They have to go buy oil from somebody else and then make gummies. Then there is HB 1205, and that would amend the Cannabis Control Act to calculate for the amount of weight for the cannabis so that it would be equal to what is in the actual bill that they have. And that's made it out of committee as well. I think this also gets to the resealable aspect of it. Then there is HB 25, that's also made it. That is the one that actually raises the craft grower limit to 10, but it suspends their tax for 2 years. So now you can own up to 10 craft grows. They're going to issue another 60 craft grows. They haven't changed the 150 license limit, but you don't have to pay taxes. And then there's HB 32, also made it out, also regarding the craft growers. It provides that a premises may co-locate up to 3 craft grows and a dispensary or an infuser. And that would be effective immediately if it passes and it has a shot. Those are the bills that got out. It looks like there's more licenses and more opportunities for craft grows in the state. It's a limited market state. The price of cannabis is still pretty high. Maybe you want to do some business in Illinois. And if you do, go visit me at cannabisindustrylawyer.com. And now back to you, Alaina, with more Weed Talk News.
Very disturbing story has emerged from North Carolina, a state with very strict cannabis and hemp laws, even though Delta 8 is legal in North Carolina next door. According to High Times, 42-year-old Margaret Bracey was alone working for an exotic hemp company when a 22-year-old named Charles Haywood robbed that store and got away with $750. But before he fled, he stabbed Bracey multiple times and she died. This week, a judge ruled that this assault justifies capital punishment and the death penalty. Ultimately, it was his own mother who turned him in when she saw surveillance video captured at the store. Turning now to Washington state, one of the first states to legalize cannabis in the US in 2012, allowed businesses to conduct pre-employment drug screening. But now a bill has been passed by their House to join California and Nevada as the only other two states to ban those tests. Matthew Friedlander has more from that state.
Hello, everyone. Matthew Friedlander here, coming to you from the owner's office at Skagit Organics with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. So we are in the 12th week of the legislative session here in Washington, and things are moving right along. Most notably, a bill has passed the House and the Senate and is on the way to the governor's office for signing, and this bill will remove cannabis from pre-employment drug screenings. Great news for anybody in Washington looking for a job and using cannabis in a state where cannabis is legal to use. We also have a bill still moving through the process that will allow the LCB to regulate synthetic cannabinoids inside the I-502 system. There are some strong feelings about this bill and not good ones, so we are keeping an eye on this. There are several other bills still moving through the process, most notably the excise tax removal for patients is still in the works, so we are hopeful that that'll see the light at the end of the tunnel. That's what I got for you this week. Matthew Friedlander reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
As we continue to follow the end of cannabis prohibition around the world, in Missouri, that market is flourishing. And that's where you'll find Brandon Jones. And this week, we introduce a new sponsor to the Missouri Report, Baker Brands. Here's Brandon's Missouri Cannabis Report.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with B Green Distribution of Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And this week, sponsored for the first time by Baker Brands. What's up, guys? Appreciate you. Check out their stuff. They got over 1,000 SKUs. So I'm out here at CannaCon in Oklahoma City. Quite a turnout already. Lots of vendors. People are actually waiting outside to get in. It's like a big crew getting ready to just come in the doors, getting ready to come in and see the whole show. Just a little bit about Missouri news on the way down here. Driving from Kansas City, I had to add an hour and a half to my trip to make sure I wasn't driving through Kansas. No way I want to get pulled over with anything in the vehicle in any way in the state of Kansas. It's a 30-day minimum sentence even for paraphernalia. So I had to drive through Missouri, add an hour and 45 minutes to get into Oklahoma to make it to the show. Did get to drop by quite a few dispensaries on the way. And my favorite thing that I saw at any of the dispensaries was a 3-generation, a daughter, mother, and grandmother in a dispensary, checking out the products, going over, asking questions about terpenes. This is what I want. Listen to the bud tender, actually listen and educate. And seeing all three there was just an awesome thing to see here in the state of Missouri. So very, very happy to see the stigmas getting changed. Appreciate all the support from the community. Again, if you can get down to Oklahoma City, check out CannaCon. That would be awesome. Big turnout, lots of fun shows. And again, I'm Brandon Jones with B Green Distribution, the Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Stay educated and medicated, everybody. Have a great week.
Brandon Jones, Missouri Cannabis Report, is brought to you by Baker Brands, a curated B2B marketplace for head shops and dispensaries.
One of the most symbolic changes in cannabis policy in the U.S. was the rescinding of the Cole memo by then Attorney General Jeff Sessions in 2018. Now the current AG, Merrick Garland, is looking into reinstating that memo, which basically said that the federal government would not interfere with any cannabis business in a legal state. For the rest of the news out of Maryland and D.C., here's Andrew Behringer.
Hello, my name is Andrew Behringer, and this is the DC Area Report for Weed Talk News. In federal news, a bill was reintroduced to Congress, the Veterans Equal Access Act. Now, if this bill is approved and enacted, it would allow veterans to get medical cannabis recommendations from their VA doctors, as long as they live in a legal cannabis state, of course. Currently, VA doctors are only allowed to discuss medical cannabis with their patients, nothing more. This bill has been submitted many times to Congress with bipartisan support. Unfortunately, it has failed every time. If this bill passed this time around, it would symbolize a huge step forward in legalizing cannabis in the United States, as well as access to medicine for our veterans. Thank you for your service. This week in Washington, D.C., top local officials participated in a congressional hearing demanding that the city fully legalize cannabis and create framework to regulate cannabis sales. Now, back in 2014, Washington, D.C. residents voted to legalize cannabis. However, for some reason, Congress has stopped any laws from being passed that would establish a regulated cannabis industry in the district. Let's hope D.C. gets what is needed for their industry. Finally, in Maryland news, the state Senate advances their cannabis bill, SB 516, with amendments added. At the beginning of this legislative session, the House and Senate had congruent bills for legalizing adult use cannabis in Maryland. However, during the legislative process, both House and Senate added amendments to their respective bills. It is now up to the House and Senate to iron out these amendments to create one bill before it can be sent off to the governor's desk for his John Hancock. Well, that will do it for me, Andrew Behringer, and the DC Area Report for We Talk News. See you next week.
If you know anything about the state of Vermont, you might know that Ben & Jerry's ice cream is based there. What you may not have known is that one of their founders, Ben Cohen, is a great philanthropist and advocate for responsible use of cannabis. Now he is starting a fund that will offer access to capital for Black entrepreneurs from the sales of the B3 brand of pre-rolls, live resin vapes, and flower. 80% of the profits from those sales will help advocacy movements and provide low-interest loans to those most impacted by the failed war on drugs. With more from the state of Vermont, here's our green nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. Tall Truck, a small licensed indoor cultivator, was given a $20,000 fine by the Cannabis Control Board for transporting cannabis outside of Vermont. The owner posted a video of himself in New York City on Instagram to promote his cannabis. Someone reported the video, and following an investigation by the Vermont Cannabis Control Board, Tall Truck was cited and fined for delivering cannabis into New York City. This week in the capital of Vermont, the Vermont Cannabis Control Board voted to approve the license applications of 36 cannabis establishments, twice as many approved from last month, 24 cultivators, 8 manufacturers, and 4 retailers. The Cannabis Omnibus Bill H-270 made it through crossover and landed in Senate Economics. Stay tuned to vermontgrowers.org for legislative updates. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Cannatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at cannatrols.com.
The big story in Massachusetts is the next Live in the Weeds from the Summit Lounge, presented this time by Berkshire Roots on Wednesday, April 12th. And maybe this is self-serving, but the first one was a big success. And now PCM founder Jimmy Young is teaming up with his former NECN sports colleague Mike Adams for a reunion at Massachusetts' only private cannabis social club. And with more from the Bay State, here's PCM founder Jimmy Young.
Thanks, Alaina, and boy, am I glad you're back. I'm PCM founder Jimmy Young, and this is the Massachusetts Cannabis Report sponsored by Holyoke Cannabis. Let's start in the western part of the Bay State in Amherst. You know, that's where the University of Massachusetts is located. Well, for years now, the UMass Student Cannabis Education Coalition held Extravaganza, a celebration of cannabis in Amherst. Now, it all started back in the 1990s when it was more of an act of civil disobedience for the reform of cannabis laws. Now that the state has been legal for adults to use since 2018, Extravaganza will be a celebration of all things having to do with the culture of cannabis consumption. And this year it returns on April 15th and will be held at the Franklin County Fairgrounds in Greenfield. Now, there's another former politician getting into the ranks of cannabis dispensary owners. It's Josh Zakem. And if that name sounds like the guy they named the bridge after, you're right. The Zakem Bridge is named in memory of the late Lenny Zakem, longtime Northeast director of the ADL. Josh is Lenny's son, and his uncle Stu Zakem has a PR company in New York called Bridge Strategic Communications. He also has the distinction of being the first person I interviewed for In the Weeds back in 2018 at NECAN. Josh got approval for his dispensary in the Back Bay on March 6th. Now they just have to find the right location to begin the next never-ending process of opening a dispensary. Good luck, Josh. That's the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News, sponsored by Holyoke Cannabis. I'm Jimmy Young.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.
First quarter results from publicly traded cannabis companies are now being released, and our stock expert, Doug Miller, has this week's cannabis stock report.
Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report for Weed Talk News. Leafly. Well, they're changing their business model. No longer going to be reporting on the industry, but they're going to have consumer-oriented content, such as information on products. Leafly remains on the exchange's list of non-compliant companies. So let's go ahead and look at the stock chart. It was trading around 37 cents today, and it looks like it's going to continue to dip. I'm not so sure that this pivot is exactly what the company needed, but it might have been the only thing the company could have done. So I'm going to keep my eye on it and see where it bottoms out, and then I'll report back and see if it's going to bounce. And that's this week's cannabis stock report. Reporting for Weed Talk News, I'm Doug Miller.
North of the border in Canada, there continues to be contraction of that cannabis economy. It's been just about 5 years of federal legalization and sales of cannabis in Canada. And like here in the US, some of the first dispensaries to open are now closing. Here's Debbie Facey with the Canadian Cannabis Report.
Hi, this is Debbie Facey from We Talk News, your Canadian correspondent with this week's Canadian Toke. In Canada this week, we don't have too much going on, but one of our biggest news or stories that we have is the laws and the regulations are going to be going under some nice consulting when it comes to creating a better market for us here in Canada. So the markets, or I should say the categories that they are looking at, especially to be able to gain some insight on, are the licensing rules, the security requirements, the production requirements, packaging, and the label regulations. Right now, we do have several, I don't want to say a variety, but we do have several different indications when it comes to the legal cannabis that we do sell here. And with that, it does make some of the provinces not necessarily have the same laws and the same rules when it comes to distributing, creating, labeling, packaging, or distributing. So they're trying to make a little bit more of a streamlined sort of, I guess, almost streamlined setting where it will just make it a lot easier across the board, so across Canada, compared to by provinces. This will then also allow more products to be able to reach the shelves, and also a better turnover when it comes to products being able to be reached among different markets, different demographics, and different provinces. Next, what we have in Canada, unfortunately, is the decline in the tax reform that we had all pled and asked for. Most of Canadians that were within the industry had pled with the government in order to put some sort of taxation on cannabis. As of right now, we have not heard any great news, somewhat of a rejection, but at the same time, we are still working on it. Unfortunately, it is something that we are still facing and enduring, especially when it comes to the different products and the lines that are coming out with the craft or non-craft indication on it, which is making it a little bit more pricier than it should. Unfortunately, again, it is something that we are waiting and hoping to see coming at least in 2014, at least, but that is just something that I am hoping for. as well as every other Canadian, but that is something where the government has to sadly put their two buds in. This is Debbie Facey from We Talk News, your Canadian correspondent with This Canadian Toke. Peace.
And finally tonight, just when you thought Atlantic City in New Jersey was going to be a haven for cannabis consumption lounges, that stigma has reared its misinformed head again. This week, the Newark, New Jersey Central Planning Board denied the application by rapper Raekwon from the Wu-Tang Clan for his Hashatoria. It seems that the clergy from the oldest church in Newark protested. Those protests came from elders, clergy, and parishioners. They cited increased traffic and people walking to their cars stoned. Another example of why normalization and acceptance is more important than legalization. And it's why we say it's a whole new world of weed out there, so use it responsibly. I'm Alaina Pinto for Weed Talk News. We'll see you next week.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore, so I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now, if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weegits.com, Weegits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weegits filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly. That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
As a broker, we have access to many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways, and they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.